and you help them figure out, what the pains are. And then you're starting to say, okay, what are the options to resolve the pain? And you just don't start by saying, okay, let's go and do BPM.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Well, welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. Today I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Gilles Morin. Now, Gilles is a BPM expert and trainer. He is a business architect and entrepreneur, reigning from all the way across the other side of the world from me at the moment, from Canada, I believe. Gilles, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
So maybe what we could do to begin with is, I'm sure our audience or the people listening will want to, have a bit more of a grid or a bit more of a framework for who you are, your background, your experience. I know that you're quite well known throughout the BPM community, but I guess for this series, we are welcoming people in that may only be just joining the BPM community, and so they may not have heard of you or read your work. So maybe take us back to the beginning where your interest for process first began, and then leading up to where you are today.
Very well. In fact, I did my first process diagram in the early 80s.
Right.
I was working for a government agency, and we had issues because of lack of documentation around process for their policy, their supply chain policy. And I spent a year and a half documenting process and analyzing process. Anyway, and at that time, the knowledge of process was absolutely non-existent. In fact, was the same years where we were starting to think about change management.
Right.
There was no book. It was not a discipline, not well known. So it's these years. This is how it started.
Yes.
And then I sort of have a hybrid pattern where I did play different roles in IT as IT relationship managers. I was also a change management expert where I was working in different software implementation project and taking care of change management. And when you sit or you play the role of change agent, you are confronted quite rapidly to the operational issues / process issues / organizational issues. So these 5-6 years where we did develop the first change management methodology, we were also start thinking about, okay, how do we grab the process beast? So that's quite a few years, 85s, 80-ish years. Then I went on and worked, in fact, several jobs. I was essentially a turnaround agent, the guy you would send to organizations that have different issues.
Right.
And therefore, when you come in and you have major issues in different organizations, you just can't say, oh, let's use technology to fix it, or let's use training to fix it.
Right.
So it did start by starting around, okay, what's happening with the human systems? What are the performance issues with the human system? Okay, what about the technology system? And what about the operational systems? Right. So I spent about 25 years as a middle manager and vice president, and I was in charge of creating new unit. For instance, in one of the units, I did implement a process office. So for one of the first process office in the early 2000s.
Right.
So I sort of slowly get into the process world by the IT view, where I played a role as managers and a change agent, by the change management roles, and also by the consulting, as I did spend 10 years as consulting, implementing technology change, and having to fight to deal with process and create space so we can deal with processes.
Yes.
So I would say that that's the background. The thing really got very serious, if I may say something like that. When I left Export Development Canada, I was VP there in charge of innovation, and we had done an overview of how the process, automating process across the world for supply chain was changing the financial and the physical supply chain. And then I decided to move into the BPM space and spend the next 15, 20 years building the BPM knowledge, investing in BPM methodology, and delivering business process management. So in the last 15 years, what I have done in the BPM space is incubate BPM Program, incubate BPM Center of Expertise, incubate and manage a transformation, process-driven transformation over public and private organization of different size.
Right.
So I think at that time I did integrate all the knowledge, the exposure, and the different learning that you get from coming from different space, IT, change. I have to add also that one of the things that also did influence is I did some OD, organizational development, and I went through some good training around that. So all of that means that when you approach process issue, performance issue, you're able to connect the dots.
Right.
You're not just focusing too fast, too deeply in trying to fix a process or doing some process modeling for doing process modeling. Anyway,
yes.
So that's the story. Okay.
Right. Now, I'd imagine you've obviously got quite a long, diverse history, background, and experience there. When talking about when going into an organisation, maybe that are experiencing different problems, they have different pain points. Do you find that they're often linking it to processes, or that's not the way an organisation generally thinks, and so they bring you in, and it's almost like a bit of a light bulb moment when you talk to them about BPM in a way that they understand?
That's a good question. I would not say that when a potential customer calls you in, is going to tell you that he has process issue. Okay. Some of them will, and will, they think vaguely that process is something, but you would question them and they wouldn't be able to really answer with more precision. So most of the time they have a pain. I would say 75% of the time I come in, they have pains. They want to talk to you about their pains, and about a quarter of the time they have a vision. So I remember a CIO saying, listen, Gilles, I want to take my IT shop from that state to that state, and I need your help to help me figure out how we go from there to there. Okay. He would not talk about process, and I would not bring that early. I had to get in, help them start sharing the CSE, that thing, a common C of what's going on, what are the issues, and maybe 6 months, a year and a half, then business process management, then process management come into the play, and they are ready to listen to understand what it means, and wanting to act on it.
Right.
So that would be the answer there. So no, I don't hear process coming right away. Although we all know that in 80-90% of failures, it's process driven more than human system driven. Okay.
Right. That's great. And now for someone that's listening right now, that they're hearing what you're saying, they're part of an organization that maybe they don't have a very mature or robust BPM framework in place. Now you talked about how an organization will come to you 75% of the time because of pain points, 25% because of their vision and I guess goals and opportunities. For someone within an organization, would I be correct in saying that the best way for them to introduce them or start taking that organization on the journey of BPM is to start with the pain point? Because I guess if you're not senior management, then maybe you're not in a position where you have the liberty to sort of cast vision and talk about opportunities, because the CXO level, they're the ones that are looking from that strategic level. So I guess if you're within an organization, maybe at a lower level, spotting the pain points would probably be the first way that you would go about introducing BPM.
Yes, same thing with business architecture. You have to resolve problems. So you have to tackle the issues at first. And the first moment of truth is your capacity to do the right diagnostic.
Right.
And to have your client, when you play back your observation, what you hear, what you've seen, etc., and you help them figure out, what the pains are. And then you're starting to say, okay, what are the options to resolve the pains? Mm-hmm. And you just don't start by saying, okay, let's go and do BPM. They don't care. They really don't care.
Right.
So at this point in time is how well did you land with them when you play the diagnostic? And then when you propose what you'll do about it, how clear how clear will it seem to them that pathway to unlock the issues of the problems? Okay.
Right.
Then you may be doing some work around process, but you don't call it necessarily process management. So you create teams to move into problem solving. You work with the team to make sure you understand where things are broken. You do some mapping with post-note, with post-it, or with drawing very rough, and you have the teams to, that's it. Yeah, that's where it's broken. And as soon as you get into the solutions mode and you can see the benefits coming, then they become curious.
Right.
And they want to know more about it. Set the stage to be open for BPM dialogue.
Right.
Okay. Then the next step is, at the same time during diagnostic, you are able to gauge their level of maturity of moving into process, not only technically speaking, but from a culture, behavior, leadership perspective. So you're able to, at the same time, prepare some BPM maturity plan, quote unquote. I don't call it BPM maturity plan. I said to them, listen, we'll build up your capacity to resolve operation problem and manage from end to end and give you full visibility. But that's required that you master management of your process, KPI, business rules. So I'll help you build that. Yes. And at the same time, you can say, okay, because you're low maturity, again, we don't see it like that. Here are 2 or 3 things levers will play in the short term.
Right.
Okay. And that's when you start building your BPM program based on the maturity level that they have.
Right.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's so important to take them on that journey where you're not introducing lingo, like industry lingo, like BPM and process management. That's not solving their problem. Like that they want to know I've got a pain. How can you alleviate this pain? Exactly.
It's basic principle. You don't sell business architecture and you don't sell BPM. What you sell is resolving a pain, like I said, I repeat myself, or making it clear making it clear to them and having them saying how they will materialize their vision. Okay.
Right.
And along that way, you will be building up their BPM transformational or organizational capacity.
Yes.
Okay?
Great. Now, you're talking about doing, I guess you could call them maybe discovery sessions where you're using sticky notes, you're getting with the team to work out, okay, let's look at your process, let's see where it breaks down. Talk to us a bit about what are the right ingredients or the best ingredients for that process of I guess, discovering an organization's processes. What are the right ingredients that need to come together to make those discovery sessions effective? And I guess another way you could talk to that point is maybe what are some of the challenges or obstacles that might arise when bringing a team together to understand an organization's processes?
Okay. There are two paths. Either you have a management team or executive team having issues and pains, or you're being called by a VP or director that has operational pains. So that's two different paths, and you can't move into discovery the same way.
Right.
So let's split that. If you get called by a line manager or VP operations, marketing, HR, wherever they are, they have a team and it's at level of operation. What you need to do is, first of all, in the discovery is ask the right questions.
Right.
Okay. And the right questions that will invite them to share their thinking, their observation. So for instance, why do you say this is broken? How do you see that it's broken?
Right.
Okay. So it starts with the person who did call you. Okay. Why did you call me? Why is it a pain? Why do you think it's a pain? Okay. If you don't touch it, if you don't address the pain, what will happen? Okay. So that's the first step in trying to get into his mind and understand what he sees.
Right.
Okay. Then based on that, you discover quite rapidly the stakeholder, the
Yes.
actors at play. You need to understand, you need to size fairly rapidly the key actors.
Right.
And then get and meet with these people and ask the right questions again. You don't need to ask 15 questions, but the 2 or 3 questions you ask are critical to get them going and so they can share their see.
Right.
Okay. So that's the first level is that individual contact stakeholder. Why do you care? If we don't resolve it, what will happen? And et cetera, et cetera. The next step is then to propose to assemble or have all the key players in the room.
Right.
Okay. In order to start not only hearing, unfolding the story, but also mapping their mind.
Right.
Okay. And this is very free format approach.
Yes,
okay, so
right.
Tell me what happened. Well, that guy sent me that notes, or he sent me that package, or it is, and then it's stick on the desk for that long, Then you start, okay, what happened next? What happened next? Okay.
Right.
And you help them start seeing the work.
Yes.
Okay. Because it's not documented anywhere. It's certainly not in policy, contrary to what they think. Okay. So they start depicting the work and start visualizing the work. And that's how you're starting to get meat around the bone.
Right.
Share the see, put some data in, and then the next step, once you get the first view, then you get into the measuring, inquiry, qualitative, quantitative, survey, and all of that.
Right.
In order to really validate what the real problems are.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a session where you go a bit deeper and you can do survey, you can do test on different files and tagging and all of these things. Once you have data, once you have check, what is perceptions, what is reality, what are some of the issue and the sub-issues, then you're willing to move into problem solving. Not me doing problem solving, but working with them saying, okay, how could we resolve that? So the discovery phase is not something like little a, little b, little c. It's something that you have steps you will go through. You will always use the same approach, if I may say. And the idea is to get to a point where people look at you and say, that's it. Yeah, this is where the pain is. And these could be options. And yes, they're feasible. So
Right.
at operational level, you do groundwork. you do work with team. If you get the same issues where we have pain, it's not working, we have issue with our supply chain, but you're being called by executive level. You can't get into that level.
Right.
Quite often, the first step is to understand their strategic view, understand their targets, their view of where do you want to be?
Right.
Show me your strategic plan. How did you make these options? So that step, I call it strategy reframing. It's a step where you try to read, understand the strategic posture, because you don't want to get too deeply, too fast in operational issue. You want to be able to connect the pains or the vision to the roots, the strategic thinking, the strategic route, to make sure you're going to be working on the right stuff.
Right.
Okay? You don't want to work on causes that will not resolve or support the strategic imperatives.
Yes.
So I don't know if it makes sense to you, but it's important that I always take some time in saying, in doing strategic reframing. Only then I'm ready to start mapping the value creation process model with them.
Right.
Okay. At that stage, then I don't want operational teams. I said, give me your line managers, your middle managers that know the shop. I need X workshop time frame, and we'll map out together your operating model and your value creation model.
Right.
Like a blueprint.
Yes.
I don't want you to tell me the swim lane story, and I don't just talk to me about how you operate and your business model. Then at that stage, what we build, we're modeling the business architecture with a process view, a very important process view. Okay.
Right.
And that's quite important here, because I may be positioning myself with a certain difference with other school of thought.
Right. Okay.
There are a lot of people paying attention to capability mapping, and it's important. But with business people, I don't start with capability. I start with process, because process is about the work they do and how they create value.
Right.
Eventually, when we'll do strategy execution and transformation execution strategy and all of that, obviously we'll look at the capability and all of these things. So
yes,
I spend a lot of time, and I really pay a lot of attention to having them mapped how they create value. So how many value chains you have, how many value streams you have, how would you name them?
Right.
Don't talk to me about the marketing. Okay, marketing is a function.
Right.
So we really work with them on how do you create value, and what is the process? How does it reflect in the process model? Okay.
Right. Right.
At that point in time, we do diagnostic. I say, okay, in all of these value streams, in all of these process, okay, thinking of your strategic imperative outcomes, what's the most important?
Right.
Which of these are broken and are the most contributive to your strategic priorities? We call it the pain and gain matrix game. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is where then you get right into which process, which value stream we should tackle first, and why. And at the same time, during these workshops, we do diagnostic on why did you put that process of value stream red? So we're able to do some diagnostic that we're going to check at a later stage. So you can see how we moved into process, but at operational level or strategic level, we're not going to approach it the same way.
Right.
Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So for an organization, and this is something that I've come across a number of times, where an organization, they'll go through the whole sort of documentation period or exercise activity. And they will, I guess maybe it's come from, they've heard they need to get it done, or they've heard someone talk about it, and it was kind of like a spontaneous, well, let's get things documented. But they get 5 years down the track after it's been documented, and the senior management's kind of questioning, well, why do we go to all that effort? Like we mapped it once. It's all the same information's in the minds of the people. They're just continuing to do the same process. Why did we even do that in the first place? And so maybe if you want to talk to us about the importance or the value of, I guess, that continuous management or continuous improvement, and how that plays a part, because I think some organizations out there, and probably you could say more specifically some people out there, are burnt by the whole process documentation mapping exercise because it wasn't done effectively, and they got no value out of it.
Very good question. First of all, let's take out of the way one situation. And it's a real situation in a few organizations where they'll call you in, they will ask you to do process documentation, but the driver is, I've got a lot of retiring people that have the knowledge in their head, right, and I need to have that available to the staff. Okay, yes. So the motive is clear, and the way you approach it is going to be different, but you'll have to go through documenting the key process in a way it's accessible and become a shared knowledge. Right. So that's 1-2 case over 10, 15 cases. Now, let's go back. The first thing that I recommend to people that say we need to sprint, to do a big sprint on our process document, I say no. Okay? No. Especially if you don't know why. Right. Okay. Second, I have not seen any organization that spend a year to 2 years mapping everything in case-wise or these process and business architectural tool being successful. Right, okay? Right. Because this is exactly what you described. The management look at that and don't understand what the value is. Right. So the mindset was document to document and make sure it fits in the tool. The mindset was not, what are we trying to solve? Yes. Okay. So I am more on saying document is a product, is a output of something. Right. Okay? It's not something you need. It's something that will come out of your process project, a realization or process optimization project. So right. That's the first thing. The second is, how much document do I need for what purpose? In the continuous improvement side, especially with organizations where their lean is well embedded, okay? Yes. Process is not the issue because you have these team chasing waste and resolving issue and measuring. Right. Okay? It's an issue when at the management level, they're starting to question, okay, well, where should we spend our energy with these lean teams? Right. Where next? And right. Why not there? Because most of them have spent years going, chasing a problem, resolving a problem, chasing a problem, and that's fine. And then it creates an excellent culture that you want ground up of people yes. that chase. However, they don't have the documentation or the tools to decide where to put the process dollar next. Right. I remember one of the head of Nike in charge of lean, who was saying the competition amongst the company internationally is so fierce that we can't just do lean to do lean as we've been used. We need to start doing strategic lean. Right. And in order to do strategic lean, you do some sort of blueprint. You need some sort of common model, business operating model to decide where to go next.
Right, right.
You just don't go by feeling, it's bad there. So the process documentation becomes extremely important when it takes the form of process architecture, for instance.
Right.
When you want to move out of ground up continuous improvement. Okay. Again, in the agile world now, to take another parallel, there are people who think you don't need to do documentation anymore. Well,
Right.
no. In the agile world, there are two element key. First of all, you don't do agile to do agile. You need to start with blueprints. So the people who are now part of the Safe 5 movement or a school of action, if you want, okay? Clearly, at the strategic level, you need to start with document, blueprint, process blueprint,
Right.
okay? And then after that, you can decide where you're going to invest your agile teams. So an agile needs to be built on blueprint before you moved into the sprint.
Right.
Now, at the sprint level, you will need some documentation. And what we're saying is we're trying to move more and more to what we call model-based documentation rather than text-based documentation.
Right.
And this is where your business architecture software or some tools become important. This is where, for instance, if you implement these BPMS, these smart business process management suites, okay, they build through these platform documentation, but not in the sense of writing things. It becomes artifacts that you create.
Right.
So the notion of document is has several dimensions, but one thing we don't want is don't waste time documenting your process for the sake of documenting it because you need something in your repository for the enterprise architect. We don't do that anymore. It has to be purpose driven. And ideally, go and use these smart tools, which will also help you to document, but in a much smarter and a much more effective way.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Now, talking about, I mean, you're talking about agile there. Maybe, I mean, I'm sure that you've obviously had a long history, and you would have seen different methodologies and mindsets and different things, I guess, pop up over the years, and maybe some stuck around, maybe some kind of came and went. When you look at the current state of, I guess, I mean, this is quite a broad question, but when you look at the organizations that are operating today and embarking on BPM initiatives, what are the current challenges, or what are the current fads, or what are the current things that organizations are looking into? I guess one that comes to mind for me is, and it has been for a couple of years now, I would say, is the idea of automating your processes. But for some organizations, it's pitched to them in a very attractive way that they kind of want to just bypass all of the tedious maybe documentation work. That they just want to dive straight into, let's automate everything. If we can free up our resources and create more efficiency, if automation is going to do it, then let's just go straight there. But sometimes if the processes aren't efficient or running as optimally as they could be, then by automating them, you're just going to go in the wrong direction faster. But speaking on that point, what are some of the current challenges that you see that are the things that organizations are facing at the moment in terms of navigating BPM? And I guess maybe what are some other things that are vying for that attention or that space that BPM fills?
There are several cause or reasons why BPM, why organizations face BPM issues while trying to implement it. I would say first and foremost, it's this lack of understanding and shared understanding of what process management is about.
Right.
So it's often related, or it's often triggered by some magical promise or thinking around some new exciting technology.
Right.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, I've seen in the 80s how technology became the strategic weapon. And I saw how the CIO and the top management became berserk on, we need to get into technology to compete. In today's environment, the technology has matured to a way where it is a strategic weapon. And yes, we can introduce it very early because they have built this technology from a business point of view that you're able to implement in short cycle with ROI, the fast ROI. Okay, so the technology has evolved, but there is still that magic aura. Well, think of COVID-19, what we're going through right now.
Right.
It is the catalyst of going digital. Okay?
Yeah.
What was impossible to obtain before, now I'm surrounded by computer guys. And just this morning, one was saying, we've done in 3 months what took 3 years to do, would have taken 3 years to do. Why? Because the sense of urgency, the technology required to have your shop continue to operate. All the drivers now have changed the rules and have changed the way you make calls. So having said that, so the first issue we deal when we see organization wanting to go BPM, it's not the executives who want to go BPM, but it's either pushed by the CIO, the enterprise architecture team,
right,
or it's pushed by indeed some business people, but with very limited knowledge of what it means.
Yes.
So that's the first, I would say, the first issue. And behind that, no one shared the same see about process management, why, what it is, and why we want that here, and how we're going to define that it's going to be a success. It's the same thing with going digital. If you ask the executive, okay, you're all going crazy about digital investment. Why? Where? What for? They don't know. They just know they want to go digital. So it's the same issue. The second issue in many organizations, BPM is an IT stuff.
Right.
Okay, it's IT who decide to buy a BPMS platform.
Right.
It's IT who decide to acquire a modeling tool, okay, for the architects, etc. So in many organizations, IT sees that as their stuff, their ownership of BPM, which is totally wrong.
Right.
And that contributes to feeding and building on the wall between the business people and the IT, because it's the same behaviors again and again.
Yes.
One of the other elements is the notion of capability to do business process management.
Right.
What do I need to be capable of in order to move along the maturity curve with business process management?
Right.
Okay. Do we start by building a BPM COE? We hired a process architect, couple lean guy, couple process analysts, and there we go. Is that simple, quote unquote?
Right.
So lack of methodology, selecting levers without understanding how they play together. For instance, the governance lever around BPM versus the BPM COE versus having a team going all over the place, knocking at doors and trying to find process projects.
Right.
All of that are managed in a silo mode or in a improvision. I don't know how to say that in English, but as it's not planned. It's just you're going with the waves.
Right. Right.
So these are some of the issues. Now you mentioned something interesting. Technology is fine, but it can just amplify or accelerate me going in the wrong direction, but faster.
Right.
It comes back to the strategic framing that the process leads need to do.
Right. Okay.
You have with the executive team to be very clear on the purpose on the success. Why? And it's the same thing with digital, by the way. Okay? Before you start moving. And that doesn't mean you take years to think about it. There are ways you can accelerate the strategic framing exercise. We talk about months with a small s here, with the right people. And it can be, I've seen it done even in days in a smart way. Okay? You need to start there. Okay? And then as soon as you've got your right models, process model, capability model, etc., that you have translate into heat map, you've got everything to help you stay focused, stay the north. At least that's what we say in the north. Okay, and then align your dollars, business invest. I don't use IT investment dollar anymore. I use business investment dollar. And this is how you can make sure all the dollars go to the right place. Mm. But it's framed around a strategic framing, designing the right models with the right people, doing the heat map around these, connecting the priority, and making sure then for each of these priority, you have the right execution approach. And there you can be agile. There are places, normally in a transformational portfolio, you've got lean project because you have discovered that this process, this one are broken. You don't need to automate that. You just need to lean them, give them a lean shot. Yes. In other case, you know that these value stream, this process and this process are good candidates to accelerate and automate. And you should not spend too much time trying to map the as is. They're good candidates, but you have to have a BPMS or this productivity platform at hand, okay, to accelerate. Then you know you're going to be using your BPMS platform with the right purpose on the right priority.
Right.
Okay? So you can acquire them quite early in transformation stage.
Yes.
Because they're supported by all the thinking and the governance and the tools that you need.
Right.
Now, that's one sure way to make sure you're not going to waste time on technology that will get you faster to the wall, to hit the wall.
Yes, right.
It starts with a strategic dialogue.
Yes, yeah.
So any BPM leaders, I'm sure if you talk to Roger Burleton, if you talk to Roger Tregear, they will tell you about the importance of that strategic dialogue up front.
Right.
Okay.
That's great.
Right.
You mentioned earlier there about obviously the current climate we're going through and how it's the catalyst for pushing us into I guess making incredible improvements in things that would have taken 3 years and now they take 3 months. Talk to us a bit about whether BPM plays a part in the current climate, because there are obviously a lot of organisations that are suffering quite a bit right now, and I guess quite a few organisations they've cut all procurement. They're not looking to invest in anything. They're letting staff go. And they're taking that approach. There are other organisations that all of a sudden BPM has skyrocketed to the top of their priority list because senior management's going, hang on a second, all of our staff are working remotely. They're working from home. How do we know what they're doing? How do we know whether everyone that's part of that process is doing what needs to be done? And how do we know that we're not going to get to the end of this and find a huge pile of rubbish for us to clean up when we all come back together? So does BPM play a part right now?
BPM in the COVID-19 situation can play a part at 3 or 4 places. Okay, the first, the obvious one, I am risk VP. Okay, so I'm in charge of enterprise risk management.
Right.
I was not able to have money in the past to document process and control through processes to help me do my audit, to help my team be more productive at assessing controls, assessing risk in the operation through process visibility.
Right.
So nobody would give me any money. This was, now people will start wanting to give me money. So the first thing we see is for VP of risk management, the BPM route, okay, is a solid route and an accelerating route to equip them with the visibility they require to manage process and to manage risk from end to end with the right control.
Right.
So that's the first place. There are people who talked about line of defense, and they say BPM is the third line of defense.
Right.
I can tell you that in France, it's like that. The people that are the most open, willing, welcoming process are people in charge of risk management.
Right.
Okay. The second place where it will create a big difference is the organization will realize the structuring power of BPMS. And not talking about these big, fancy, archaic IT for IT BPM platform, okay? And I'm not going to excuse myself for talking like that. I'm talking about the new generation BPMS platform, which have been architected the new way, okay? These are truly, when combined with the right process investigation and process program, are together a way to accelerate redesigning operating model, making your operating model more efficient, making your operating model more effective. And therefore, when you go to the next crisis, because there will be other crises like that, you will have an operating model that should be more agile and streamlined with more visibility on how you need to adjust it to the crisis.
Yes. Right.
So the second place where BPM plays a role there is that combination of process program with the BPMS technology, smart technology. Okay. The third one, and it's still a good one, it's the lean route.
Right.
Right now, people are discovering how heavy all their processes are.
Yes.
What they need to do is select which process are key for our survival in the next crisis.
Right.
And then redesign, lean them, whatever you want to do. You need to really have a SWAT team getting into these process, but you have selected the most important process.
Yes.
So suddenly, if I do my pain and gain matrix on process, if my objective was to grow, fast growth, okay, the heat map on my process on pain and gain would not be the same than the one on COVID, post-COVID operational efficiency, post-COVID operational agility. Okay.
Right. Right.
So you can see how your project portfolio would shift around. So in that sense, with COVID, lean route is a good way. You just need to focus on the right process to lean. You just don't lean to lean.
Yes.
Okay. So that's another place where I would say. The fourth one is that you want visibility on your key operational control point.
Yes.
You want visibility on how work is flowing. The only way to get that is with BPMS.
Right.
So if I have employees working remotely, right now, they all deal with point-to-point access with legacy systems.
Yes.
Also, not all of them, but mostly. I have no control in terms of who's going to do what. So especially in the service sector, you need to be able to connect these people with a smart platform that will allow you to see how the work flow and how things are going, where things are, where you're having blockage, okay, and all of that. So you need visibility on how work is being done by your remote workforce. Okay, so BPMS is one of the tool. It's exactly like monitoring your supply chain between tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 suppliers. The visibility comes from the supply chain BPMS or workflow. Well, the same thing in today's environment. Okay. Yep. The big trap to avoid is, I know some organizations will do that. I need visibility into the work of my employee to control them.
Right.
Not in the right sense, not with the right purpose. Okay.
Yes.
Then you are going to kill your BPM initiatives.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clearly, your people will find ways to sabotage or to work around that. Okay?
Right. Right.
So I would say these are examples of how process can play a role in today. Okay. And process would be an excellent source for a strategic dialogue around COVID-19. What do we do now? Okay. There is another place that is even as important, if not more important.
Right.
And it's also a key blockage in BPM program. A lot of BPM teams and managers and executives associate BPM to process.
Right.
You will say they don't associate it to business rules and decisions.
Right. Okay.
Whereas we know that a process, especially process in the service sector, is full of business rules and decisions. Mm-hmm. And right now, when you look at what has changed in many organizations, what did they change to become so swift, so focused? They changed the rules.
Right, right.
Okay. And the rules in the company are the management object that change the most often. So most BPM programs have no expertise and understanding of rules and decision in their model. They don't even have that. In fact, they give the rules to be coded and even to be programmed and written to the IT folks.
Right, right.
Okay. We don't want to do that anymore. And to be agile, flexible, deal with COVID and these things, you have to be able to change rules and understand the impacts and being able to connect the change in rules and decision to how your operation flow will change.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So ignoring, not knowing what business rule management, business decision management is about and how important it is to process management is an issue, is a major roadblock, and is also why we do have some issue with BPM.
Right, right, right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Good.
Now, Gilles, obviously we've in an interview of this sort of nature, we can only sort of cover so much, or very, very little, I should say. I'm sure if we kept the interview going, we could talk for a number of days just to try and scrape the surface on everything. But I'm sure that, I've tried to push it out as long as we can. I know originally I said half an hour, but we've been going for longer than that. I'm not quite sure how long, but I'm sure the people that are listening to this, they'll glean a lot of value from it. I think every point you touched on there, I could think of a number of people that I've spoken with that they need to hear this. I need to share what Gilles is talking about to them, because this is exactly what they're facing, or maybe this is what they're about to face without realizing. And so I think you've shared a lot of valuable knowledge here today. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and join me here over Zoom and share all of this with me and with the wider audience as well.
Well, thank you, Daniel. It was my pleasure. I'm passionate about that. I live that every day. And thank you for giving me a chance to share some of my thinking around that. Much, much, much appreciated. And I do hope that people will find a golden nugget, just one, but a golden nugget they will be able to run with. Okay. That's
great. That's great. There are many golden nuggets there. I can assure you.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.